He told me, "You're fired," then kissed me against the conference table, while the NDA was already waiting in a neat stack. "Without me, you're nothing," he added, like it was HR policy. I'm writing this before I lose my nerve. I'm 25, an intern at a fashion house in Milan, the kind that rents out a palazzo for runway week and makes interns haul garment bags up marble stairs. I run call sheets, book couriers, fix seating charts, and keep a spare lint roller in my tote. I share a damp apartment in Porta Romana with 2 baristas and eat leftover pistachio croissants for dinner more often than I admit. NNMY dream sounds small on paper. Become a production coordinator by fall. Get my name on a show credit. Send the link to my parents in Ohio. My fear is bigger. The blacklist everyone whispers about. In this city, one wrong move travels faster than a PR blast. I can change jobs, but not my reputation. He's the creative director, expensive watch, colder voice. At first, he remembered my name when no one else did. When he handed me his blazer during a lighting test, his fingers pressed into my shoulder a second too long. "You're too sensitive," he joked after I flinched. The way people say relax while turning the volume up. New detail, the blazer smelled like cedar and something darker. I wore that smell home on my scarf without meaning to. Another pattern. Midnight Slack pings that started as quick update and turned into still awake. The notification tone at 0:41 trained my pulse like a dog whistle. I told myself it was mentoring. He told me, "I know what's best for you." And I pretended that sentence didn't make me feel like a project. I kept collecting little symbols I didn't want, the blazer on my chair after a run-through, the key card I wasn't supposed to have to the sample room, the NDA template sitting in a shared with me folder. He'd hover behind my screen and scroll for me, knuckles grazing my wrist like there weren't eyes everywhere. Microhook. Every accident repeated too perfectly to be random. NNTHE first red flag that felt red, not pink, was a production meeting where he complimented my discretion loud enough for the room. Laughter, polite and sharp. He likes an audience. He likes to pretend it's a joke. I laughed too, because I wanted the fall contract more than I wanted principals at 10 a.m. under fluorescent lights. Another day, he closed the glass door with a soft click that sounded louder than yelling. He slid a folder toward me. Schedule, budget, NDA. Standard, he said. The paper felt cold, even though my hands were hot. I asked why an intern needed it. "Because you're valuable," he said, and then, softer. "And because I protect what's valuable." Microhook. Protection is just control with perfume. And then I tried to excuse it with context. Fashion is chaotic. People touch. People shout. The show must go on. But then he joked about upgrading my hotel to the same floor as his in Paris, for workflow. He smiled in a way that asked me to agree with him against myself. I pictured my name on a credit slide and heard the tiny sound a door makes when it locks. NNTHE, small, normal things kept me sane. The hiss of the steamer backstage, the dust on my black jeans, the cheap espresso from the machine that tasted like burnt almonds. Also the chat with my best friend, where we swapped memes and I typed "LOL, it's fine," with a stomach that didn't believe me. Microhook. It wasn't fine the night the power flickered and we stayed late. NNTHAT night, it was just the two of us and the humming exit signs. He dictated edits, I typed. He corrected a comma. I apologized, because interns do. When I stood to leave, he blocked the door with ease, not menace. Rehearsed politeness that still filled the doorway. Feedback, he said, and reached past me to turn off the overheads, leaving the room in the blue light of the city. Here's the part one haven't said. I wanted the job so badly, I kept bargaining with myself about what counted as a line. If I get the contract, it will have been worth ignoring the jokes. If I keep quiet, maybe it ends at words. If I sign, maybe he leaves me alone. Microhook. The brain will build a map that avoids the cliff even while your feet hang over it. NNTHE kiss came later. For now, part one ends here, with the NDA on the table, his blazer on my chair, and the sentence "you're fired" circling like a drone I can't switch off. I'm not writing for revenge. I'm writing because confession is the only thing I can afford that won't go on my credit card. The kiss happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that feels like filler. No runway, no crisis, just invoices and fittings. The conference room smelled like old coffee and printer ink, and the air conditioning hummed too loudly. He asked me to stay after everyone left. I told myself it was about the Paris schedule. That lie lasted exactly 6 minutes. NNHE sat across from me, blazer draped over his chair, tie loosened like he was off duty but not off script. The stack of papers between us included my timesheet and an NDA. "Standard?" he said again, sliding it toward me. My fingers brushed the edge, the paper stiff and too cold. "Without me, you're nothing," he added casually as if it were HR jargon. Then he leaned across the table and kissed me like a manager correcting a typo. And shock tastes metallic. My brain didn't know whether to freeze or to laugh. I did neither. I sat there, feeling the weight of the pen in my hand, the smell of cedar from his blazer hitting my throat like smoke. He pulled back just enough to whisper, "This is for your own good. Don't overthink." Microhook. The words "your own good" never mean you're good. And I went home carrying two symbols I hadn't chosen, the NDA in my tote, and his blazer over my arm. My roommates asked why I smelled like men's cologne at midnight. I said it was a sample from backstage. They laughed. I laughed. My stomach didn't. The blazer sat on my desk chair all night. A silent witness I wanted to burn. NNTHE escalation didn't slow down. 2 days later, he made a joke about me being high maintenance during a team briefing. Everyone laughed. He didn't. His eyes pinned me like a bug. It was the first public scene. Subtle, but sharp. A warning disguised as humor. I kept typing notes while my ears burned. Then came the midnight Slack message. "Still awake?" I stared at the notification for 20 minutes before replying yes. He wrote, "Good, we'll talk tomorrow. Discretion matters." No emoji, no period. Just that. My chest buzzed, like static. I deleted the chat, but the echo stayed. Microhook. Once you delete a message, you start hearing it louder. NNTHE breaking point wasn't the kiss, not really. It was the file. One morning I opened my email and found a message not meant for me. His name was in the sender line. The attachment was a draft labeled "Loyalty Test." Inside was a note about interns, compliance, silence as currency. He wrote, "She'll fold, they always do." My name wasn't there, but the description was me. Midwest, first internship, too ambitious to risk. Reading it was like finding your reflection in someone else's diary. NNTHAT was the turn. Suddenly, it wasn't about romance or rumors. It was about a pattern. I wasn't the first. I was just the current. I screenshotted the file, hands shaking so hard, the mouse slipped twice. For the first time, I thought, if I stay quiet, I become proof he's right. If I speak, I become a problem. Either way, I'm a line in his spreadsheet. I found an ally by accident. Another assistant, call her M, pulled me aside in the hallway. She whispered, "I saw him close the door on you. Be careful." That was it. But it was enough. Someone else saw. Someone else knew I wasn't hallucinating power plays in fluorescent light. Microhook. Sometimes one sentence from a stranger feels like a rope thrown into deep water. NNBY then. The blazer had become a symbol I couldn't ignore. It hung on my chair like a trophy I didn't want. I kept touching the fabric without meaning to, like checking if the nightmare was still real. The NDA was the other symbol, folded and refolded until the edges curled. Every time I picked it up, I thought about signing my silence or tearing it in half. NNTHE public scene that sealed it came during a Friday all hands. He looked straight at me and said, "Some people here don't understand loyalty." The room laughed politely, like it was a joke. My throat closed. My name wasn't spoken, but every eye turned my way. He followed with, "Without discipline, you're nothing." Microhook. Deja vu tastes like bile when it's in front of witnesses. And I knew then I had to act. I couldn't outshout him, but I could outdocument him. I saved the screenshot of his loyalty test. I saved the Slack notifications. I even photographed the blazer on my chair as proof of patterns. Evidence over emotion. That became my countermove. NNTHE escalation wasn't glamorous. It was slow, grinding, humiliating. But the turn had already happened. I wasn't just a pawn anymore. I had receipts. And for once I started thinking, not about his threats, but about my options. The countermove started with baby steps, because when you're 25 and on your first real job, you don't storm the castle. You build a folder. Mine was labeled receipts, screenshots, Slack notifications, the loyalty test email with his name on it, photos of the blazer draped on my chair like an unwanted pet. Each file was a brick, and the folder was the wall I stood behind. NNMY first action was quiet. forwarding the loyalty test document to my personal email. My finger hovered, shaking, because one click could be career suicide if IT tracked it. I did it anyway. Then I took a photo of my screen just in case. That night I couldn't sleep. The sound of Slack pings echoed, even though my laptop was closed. Microhook. Silence can feel louder than any notification. And step 2 was riskier. I walked into HR with my heart in my throat and the folder on a USB. The office smelled like stale coffee and lavender disinfectant. The HR representative smiled too wide, the kind that says, "We already know but can't admit it." I sat down, palms sweating against the plastic chair, and said, "I have something you should see." She adjusted her glasses, glanced at the files, and murmured, "This is sensitive." No kidding. Microhook. When HR says sensitive, they mean dangerous for you. NNTHE real countermove wasn't just HR though. It was whispering the truth out loud for the first time. I told M, the assistant who warned me. Her eyes widened. Then she said, "I'm not surprised." She admitted he had pulled similar stunts before. Different interns, same script. That confirmation hit harder than the kiss. I wasn't chosen, I was a template. My silence was his business model. NNTHE Blazer became the centerpiece of my plan. At the next team meeting, I placed it deliberately on the back of my chair. He walked in, paused, and gave me a look that could cut glass. Everyone saw it. That moment was my first small act of defiance, turning his symbol into mine. Microhook. Sometimes the loudest statement is just leaving evidence in plain sight. Then came the Friday all hands that turned into theater. He made another joke, this time sharper. "Some interns think they're bigger than the brand." Laughter again. But I didn't look down this time. I looked straight at him. My heart hammered so loud, I thought people could hear it over the air vents. And then, almost without thinking, I said, "Some directors think silence equals consent." The room froze. My voice cracked, but it didn't matter. The hook was already in. That was the public scene. The one moment that flipped the power dynamic. People glanced between us like they'd just realized there was a script running behind the scenes. His smile faltered, just for a second, but enough. He muttered, "Too sensitive," under his breath. And that phrase, his favorite weapon, became his slip. Microhook. Abusers recycle lines until they strangle themselves with them. NNTHE fallout was immediate in micro ways. HR called me back for clarification. He sent me no messages that weekend, which was louder than any ping. The blazer disappeared from my chair. Colleagues whispered in corners but didn't look me in the eye. Power doesn't vanish in one moment, but it cracks, and the sound is unforgettable. Resolution came slower, through channels I didn't control. HR escalated my folder. The loyalty test email leaked to legal. By Monday, the director wasn't leading meetings. He was on leave. The words tasted sweet and bitter. Sweet because I wasn't imagining things. Bitter because I knew the industry loves comebacks, and men like him rarely vanish completely. Microhook. Sometimes winning looks like a pause, not a finale. NNBUT. The resolution for me was personal. I walked into the office without headphones, without scanning for his reflection in the glass. My badge beeped at the security gate, and for once the sound felt like freedom instead of surveillance. I wasn't just surviving a secret anymore. I was visible, and he wasn't. NNTHE final symbol. The NDA I never signed. It sat folded in my tote for weeks until I shredded it myself. The paper made a satisfying crackle, louder than any applause. That was my victory. Not a headline, not revenge. Just the sound of choosing not to be silent property. NNHE crumbled not with a bang, but with bureaucracy. Leave of absence became contract terminated. His name came off the Milan show credits. People whispered theories, but I knew the receipts told the real story. The man who swore, "Without me you're nothing," was gone, and I still had my badge, my ID, my name on the roster. Turns out, with or without him, I was still something, and now, months later, I'm here writing this because the internet listens differently than HR does. This isn't just about me, it's about how many of us carry blazers that aren't ours, NDAs that don't protect us, Slack messages we delete but never forget. The system feeds on silence. Breaking it is the only countermove. NNSO. I'll end with a question I keep asking myself. If you were me, 25, ambitious, terrified, would you have signed the paper, or would you have burned it like I did? After the dust settled, people asked me if I felt triumphant. The truth? Triumph isn't the right word. It felt more like walking out of a fire with my eyebrows singed and my clothes smelling like smoke. You're glad you're alive, but you know you'll smell it forever. NNTHE official resolution came in HR speak. Following an internal review, the director is no longer with the company. No mention of me, no acknowledgement of what happened, just a sterile line in a corporate memo. Colleagues nodded like it was weather news. But when I walked past his office, the glass walls empty, his chair pushed under the desk, I felt something I hadn't in months. Air in my lungs. Microhook. Sometimes victory looks like an empty chair. NNHE didn't collapse in public. No dramatic outburst. No screaming match. He crumbled quietly in the background. The way powerful people do when the system decides they're too expensive to protect. The blazer was gone. The Slack ping stopped, and the office smelled like lavender disinfectant again. But my body didn't forget the sound of the glass door clicking shut behind me, or the weight of paper shoved across a table. Symbols linger longer than people. And I reclaimed small things first. I wore my own jacket, even in summer. I put a photo of my parents on my desk, one he once moved aside like it was clutter. I played my music too loud in the sample room, the bass rattling the racks. Each action was minor, but they were mine. Microhook. Control doesn't return in one big moment. It comes back in crumbs you gather slowly. NNTHE real resolution wasn't about him. It was about me. For months I thought survival meant staying quiet, but the moment I spoke in that all-hands meeting I realized silence had been his weapon, not mine. I used to believe his toxic lines, "Without me, you're nothing. You're too sensitive. I know what's best for you." Hearing them on repeat made me think they were true. But once I heard my own voice say something back, I couldn't unhear it. The spell broke. NNTHE industry did what industries do. It adjusted. People whispered about him, then moved on to the next scandal. A new director was hired, younger, shinier, with a resume full of buzzwords. The machine kept running. But in private, interns started approaching me quietly. One said, "I heard what you did. I don't feel crazy anymore." That sentence was worth more than any promotion. Microhook. When you break a cycle, you don't always see the ripple, but someone else feels it. Any NMY resolution was also messy. HR didn't hand me a medal. Some colleagues avoided me, worried I was radioactive. A few treated me like I'd been dramatic, like I'd ruined the fun. "It was just a joke," one muttered near the coffee machine, echoing his favorite shield. I learned quickly that exposing rot doesn't make you popular, it just makes you free. And I didn't leave Milan. I stayed. I got the fall contract, not out of pity, but because I earned it. My name appeared in the credits, exactly like I dreamed. I sent the link to my parents. They wrote back with emojis they didn't fully understand. For them, it was proof I was making it. For me, it was proof I could survive being visible. Microhook. Sometimes your biggest win is simply staying in the room they tried to push you out of. NNTHE blazer. And the NDA became artifacts of the story. I kept a shred of the NDA in my wallet for weeks as a reminder. I chose not to sign. The blazer I eventually donated, but before I did, I cut off one button and kept it in a drawer. Not as a trophy, but as evidence to myself that it was real. Because sometimes gaslighting lingers so long, you need physical proof you didn't imagine it. And the final irony? Months later, I saw him in a cafe near Duomo, wearing the same cologne, scrolling his phone like the world hadn't cracked. Our eyes met for a second. He smirked, like we shared a secret. But here's the difference. I wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't my boss. He wasn't my silence. He was just a man with bad cologne and no office. NNSO. This is where I end my confession. Resolution isn't neat, and it isn't cinematic. It's walking past the person who once held your future hostage and realizing they don't anymore. It's shredding a contract meant to cage you. It's seeing your name on a screen and knowing it's yours, not his. And maybe, just maybe, it's asking out loud, what would you have done? Signed the paper and kept the peace, or burned it and risked everything. The epilogue isn't about him, it's about the aftertaste. Because when a story like this ends, it doesn't really end, it echoes. It shows up in your body, in the way you flinch when Slack dings at midnight, in the way you double-check the lock on a conference room door. Victory doesn't erase scars, it just makes them less raw. NNFOR months. I carried the symbols like talismans. The shredded NDA tucked inside a notebook, the blazer button hidden in a drawer. They weren't trophies. They were reminders that silence is the easiest currency to spend and the hardest to reclaim. Every time I touched the paper fragment, I thought about the sentence he drilled into me. Without me, you're nothing. And every time I heard that echo, I countered it with proof. My credit, my badge, my name in the program. I was something on my own. NNTHE moral isn't about bravery either. I wasn't brave every day. Some nights I deleted drafts of emails to HR because I panicked halfway through. Some mornings I put on mascara twice because my hand shook too hard the first time. Courage doesn't look like a movie montage. It looks like showing up to work even when you know whispers are circling. It looks like saving files under boring names so IT won't notice. It looks like pressing send when your stomach wants to throw up. Microhook. Courage isn't loud. It's repetitive. I've thought a lot about what would have happened if I'd signed. If I'd picked up the pen, written my name, and folded myself into the silence he wanted. Maybe I'd still have the job. Maybe I'd even be further along. But at what cost? I'd be the girl who signed away her voice, who proved his spreadsheet right. And maybe worse, I'd never know if I had the strength to resist. There's no neat bow. The company moved on. I moved forward. But he still lives rent-free in my memory some days, the way a bad smell lingers in an elevator after the doors close. I see him in little things. A cedar-scented candle in a store, the stiff edge of a fresh printout, a blazer draped casually on a chair. Trauma has a sense of humor. It loves to recycle props. NNBUT. Here's the shift. Those props don't own me anymore. The blazer isn't a trap. It's a warning sign I can spot a mile away. The NDA isn't a threat. It's a piece of paper I refused. The Slack ping at midnight isn't a summons. It's just noise I can mute. Microhook. Once you reframe the symbols, they lose their bite. You're reading this and you've ever been the intern, the assistant, the junior. The one who hears you're too sensitive, like it's a performance review. Then you already know how heavy silence can be. And maybe you also know how freeing it is to break it. Even just once. Even just to one person who believes you. That's what keeps me here. Typing this out on Reddit, instead of swallowing it like another NDA, and I still ask myself the open question. What if I'd stayed quiet? What if I'd played along, laughed at the jokes, worn the blazer like a badge instead of a chain? Maybe I'd have avoided conflict. But I wouldn't be me anymore. And at 25, with an entire career ahead, that feels like a bigger loss than any blacklist, an NSO. Here's where I land. He told me, without me, you're nothing. I believed it for too long. But now I know the truth. Without my voice, I'm nothing. With it, I'm more than he ever calculated. And I'll throw the same question to you, the anonymous audience, the ones scrolling late at night, the ones who might be interns or assistants, or just people who've been told they're too sensitive. Would you have signed the paper to keep your peace, or burned it like I did, knowing the fire would change everything? This is the last part. Call it closure, or maybe just an echo. Because every story, even the messy ones, deserves an epilogue. I'm not the same intern who carried someone else's blazer home like it was evidence. I'm not the kid who thought signing an NDA would make me safe. I'm not the girl who believed, without me you're nothing. I'm still ambitious, still working long hours, still hungry to see my name on credits. But now I know the cost of silence, and I won't pay it again. Here's what I've learned. The system doesn't protect you. HR doesn't save you. Gossip doesn't shield you. What saves you are receipts, allies, and your own voice. Spoken out loud, even when it shakes. Microhook. Shaking doesn't cancel out strength. It proves it. I carry scars in subtle ways. I double-check locks. I stiffen when Slack dings at midnight. I scan conference rooms before I sit down. Trauma rewires your habits. But I also carry resilience. I say no faster. I set boundaries like locks. I listen differently when interns whisper near me, because I know what it means to risk speaking. NNTHE symbols still exist. The button sits in a dish on my dresser, a quiet reminder that objects can hold power if you let them. The NDA shred is gone, but I don't need it anymore. I have my voice, stronger than paper. The blazer? Long gone. But sometimes I still see it in my head, draped on a chair like a ghost. When that happens, I remind myself. I walked away. It didn't follow. He's still out there. I hear his name sometimes, whispered in industry circles, resurfacing in half-hearted comebacks. That's the nature of power. It tries to recycle itself. But now, when I see his face online, or hear his cologne in passing, it doesn't paralyze me. It just reminds me of the fire I already survived. Microhook. Ghosts lose their power once you stop feeding them silence. And yes, I still wonder. Would my life be easier if I'd signed the paper? Maybe. Maybe I'd be further ahead. Maybe I'd have fewer whispers around me. But would I sleep at night? Would I look in the mirror without flinching? Would I be me? The answer is no. Signing would have been the real loss. I know some people reading this will think I was dramatic, or reckless, or naive. That's fine. I didn't write this to convince them. I wrote it because someone else, maybe you, needs to hear it. Maybe you're in Milan, or New York, or Tokyo. Maybe you're carrying a blazer that isn't yours, or deleting Slack messages at 1 a.m., or staring at a contract that smells like a trap. If that's you, let me tell you, you're not crazy, you're not too sensitive, and you're not alone. NNTHE catharsis isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It comes when you sit in a meeting without fear. It comes when you delete a midnight ping without guilt. It comes when you realize your worth isn't tied to someone else's threats. That's the real ending. Not revenge. Not scandal. Just freedom. NNSO. This is my last question, the one I'll leave hanging here for strangers to answer. Because sometimes strangers are safer than friends. NNIF, you or me. 25, ambitious, terrified. Would you have signed the paper and lived in silence? Or burned it and carried the fire into your future? That's the question I keep asking, and maybe the one you need to ask yourself.